Hello and welcome to the Cyberden with your host, me, Jake the Voice. And right here we have another lovely guest on the Cyberden. Please welcome, or should I say welcome back after 9 years, if you remember that, folks, Dennis Bateman, professional actor and voice actor, best known as the voice of the Spy and Pyro from everyone's favourite hat-centric online multiplayer game, Team Fortress 2. Thanks for coming, mate.
Thank you, Jake. And hello to all of your fans in England. Glad to be here.
Let's start off with the usual bread and butter question. So, what inspired you to become an actor?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. This is going back a few years. Well, I was in my secondary school. We call high school over here, and in the States, and I found that I was a bit of a ham and also a mimic, and so I used to perform a lot of I loved impressionists. Many of your fans maybe won't be familiar with the vast canon of work that impressionists used to do in the old days. You could make a very good career for yourself and become a big star by mimicking other famous people. So I was doing that with a lot of dead actors' voices at parties, and people seemed to be regaled by that. So when I got into high school, I started doing a little bit of theater, and ultimately, in my senior year, I was cast as a pimply adenoidal Fagin in the musical Oliver, and that really sort of opened the door for me. I was just I felt so at home on the stage there and had such a great time. Years later, when I discovered that Charles Dickens had actually toured through the states in about 1845 and made a point of coming to the place where I went to high school, very near there, because he wanted to see something called a prairie, which apparently don't exist by that name, at least in England. And he got on a jaunty cart and went through a mosquito-infected swamps for a couple of days until he got to the prairie, which was in Looking Glass Township, which is still there. This was only a few miles from where I went to high school, and I sometimes think now if someone had told Charles Dickens that 160 years from now there will be this skinny Gentile playing Fagin in a musical version of his play, I wonder what he would have thought. So that's how I got started, and it took me a while to convince myself that it was going to be a valid pursuit. So I tried various other things in my first days at university. But eventually I thought life is too short not to do what you would like to do. So I switched to theater, got my degree in that, and then I started working, touring really, mostly around the southeastern United States, although I did go from Alaska to Boca Raton, Florida, doing regional theater. And then after about 5 years of that, moved to New York City. That's where I started really doing voiceover work. So that's the origin story there.
So, before we delve deeper into, of course, your illustrious career, would you say you have any favourite actors or actresses that come to mind?
Oh, absolutely. I studied with. I was fortunate enough to be audition to audition. You had to audition to get into this class, probably like they do at I don't know, RADA maybe. But I there was a woman named Uta Hagen who was a two-time Tony Award winner. She's the woman who created Martha in the Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf back in the 60s, I believe, and had a previous Tony Award for something by Clifford Odets. And she's written one of the Bibles of the acting craft. It's in every rudimentary or basic acting class in a college in the United States. It's called Respect for Acting. So I learned a technique from her that came kind of through what was called the group theater back in the 1930s. It sort of veers toward method acting, but it's much more a craft oriented rather than an artistic sort of process and technique that she teaches. So I suppose I'd call it naturalism. Maybe it's more that when you're on stage, rather than acting a character, you're being a person. So and it even extends to the point where we learned that when we're talking about our characters, we don't speak about them in the third person. we speak about them in the first person because it's me that's playing the character, not me putting on a suit of clothes and a funny hat and being somebody else. And that's when you can really connect emotionally with the character, and that's what I believe the audience responds to. Now, there at that time, back in the I'd say 50s to about the 90s, there were independent acting schools in New York City. There was the Hagen-Berghoff Studios, HB Studios, where I studied. There was the Neighborhood Playhouse, where people like Robert Duvall and Diane Keaton and there are several others whose names don't immediately jump to mind, but that's where they studied under Sanford Meisner. Then there was Stella Adler's studio and various others. All those schools now are gone, I believe. They've been gobbled up by universities. So now you have to pay a ton of money to get a degree from there, and you'll get a bachelor's or whatever. In the early days, you could just get a certificate or something like that. And I don't think I paid more than about $120 for an entire term with Uta Hagen. And she really revolutionized the way I look at the craft. So Duvall is one of my favorites. I used to love Al Pacino. I think he's gone a little bit off the rails in his later career, but I thought he was really wonderful early on. Viggo Mortensen is an actor who I really admire, and of course, Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep. They're people who, when you see them on the screen or the stage, you can you see the character they're playing, but it's them. They've found the character interiorly inside themselves. That's getting all very esoteric, but see, I'm thinking in recent months or years who I've liked a lot. Christian Bale, I think Christian makes no bones about the fact that he's a method actor, and so I really admire his work. But Meryl Streep, when I watch Meryl Streep on screen, I was taught, and I accept this, not to look for brilliance. I don't really get into brilliance in an actor's work. The highest kudo that I can give an actor is that they are competent. And that's, believe it or not as common as you might think, in my estimation. So when I see Meryl, I think this is a woman who knows her stuff. That's good enough. She knows what she's doing. And at every moment, you can tell that she's in the character, in the situation, and living that role rather than acting it, in my opinion.
Okay, now let's continue talking about, of course, your career. How is it that you kind of broke into this field of acting and radio? How did you get that ball rolling?
Well, it's funny. I was born in southern Illinois near St. Louis. I came from a very small town, but when I graduated college, I started working around St. Louis, and an actor I had met an older, fascinating guy, an older guy who'd left a career as a college dean of a department of comparative religions, had chucked it all and gone to the Goodman School of Acting in Chicago. And I met him through a summer stock company in Charlottesville, Virginia, at the University of Virginia, which is Thomas Jefferson's university. And he was back in Chicago, and I went to visit him one time, and he showed me this little pamphlet. It was just like a self-published thing, and it was how to make money in voiceovers. And I read that little pamphlet, and I thought, well, this is right up my alley. I like to play with my voice a lot, I think I've got different facilities with my voice. So when I got back to St. Louis, I went into town, and I learned that the first thing I had to do was make a demo tape. And so there was a radio man in St. Louis who helped me put together a few clips of commercial narrations and things like that. And I started getting work in St. Louis. And I thought, this is fantastic because at the time they were union jobs. They paid pretty decently for the amount of time and effort you had to put in. And you didn't need a wardrobe. You didn't need to look any way in particular. Your voice was your character. So that's when I really got into voiceovers. And I thought, for the amount of time invested, the return was better than anything I'd ever seen. So a voiceover man, when I moved to New York City, I talked to a guy, and he said, very famous voiceover people out there that I got to work with from time to time, just, by chance. And I said, well, why do you like doing this better than on camera? And he says, well, first of all, you've got to look the part on camera. And an on-camera actor can do one gig in a day. I can do a dozen voiceover gigs, and I have because I'm well enough known now, and my agent can just line them up for me. So, but in those days, of course, we walked around with our shoulder bags filled with reels of quarter-inch magnetic tape. Those were our demo tapes, and as I'm sure you know, that's undergone many different permutations to the point now where it's just all online. You don't have to have any hardware at all. It was very funny trying to I think back on how fun it was to try to go into a studio and add things to your demo with a man on the other side of the glass, cutting magnetic tape with a razor blade and sticking it back together with cellophane tape in order to make a demo reel. That's how I got started in it, and I made the bulk of my living, I would say, in New York City with my voice, doing that sort of work. And I also managed to get into an interesting situation for a company called Phone a Win, which was a place that recorded announcements for the telephone. So if you wanted the weather report, or if you wanted the lottery results, or if you wanted to place bets for the racetracks, the horse racetracks around the area, we also had the off-track betting race result phone, and that was incredible practice because by the end of a long card of racing on a given night, we'd start out with one or two races and all the results that came through with that. By the end of the night, there might be 12 races that had to be announced in the space of 59 seconds. And that was incredible practice in order to be able to speak quickly and clearly. Because in commercials, sometimes, it's money is time, and a 15-second commercial, they generally try to fit too much copy in there. But if you can read really fast, you're in.
So would you say over time, working in this field, especially, with the improvement of technology, of course, going from, having to chop up reels with a razor blade to, I guess, let's say in the 90s and the 2000s and so on and so forth, would you say that things had become easier for you, or perhaps this rise in technology introduced new challenges in your field of work?
That's a very good question. And I'm afraid I don't have an answer that puts me in the best light. But obviously, the technology has gotten not only better, but much more, the quality of it has increased so much, I think. Just the oral quality of voiceover technology has gotten so good, going from the quarter-inch magnetic reels that I started with to then cassettes, and then to CDs, and then to jump drives, and all those things that you could deliver by hand. But I would say that for someone who freely admits to being a digital immigrant and not a digital native, that's been the toughest thing for me, because when I first moved to Seattle, which was a great time to get here, by the way, around 1990, Seattle, Washington, where I live and work now, and have for the last 30 years, was just beginning. They're just on the early cusp of digital recording. They were still cutting tape with razor blades back in New York City, which I thought would be, the technological capital of all of show business. They were lagging behind, and Seattle was already on the digital pony. And so that's where I first started getting involved in the industry of computer games, because this is the one of, I think, the first place in this country that they were being produced. And this goes back to, the days of Myst and Pajama Sam, and just those very early Mickey, the Disney things that came out, Pong style and Pac-Man style games. But with voices, when they started those, the voices were fairly atrocious because they didn't hire any talent. They just used, I suppose, the studio technicians to do all the dialogue. But then they started hiring professional talent when the games got better and more involved. But that meant that eventually the studio itself became the buggy whip of the industry in a way. I still go into studios to record from time to time, but much of it is just done from a home studio. And I had to learn to not only be a voice talent and an actor and a creator like that, I had to become a sound technician. And that was a heavy lift for me because there was very little in the way of tutorial. You just had to kind of jump in there by grab it by the seat of the pants. And I took a couple of different classes, but the software was kind of all over the map. And so I span the entire origins of the digital audio industry, and I find it a little frustrating in the sense that I used to always have a director there. When we would go into audition in New York City or in the early days of my working here in Seattle, there was always, even St. Louis, it was a studio, and there was someone there from the ad agency or the corporation, if it was a corporate narration, to direct you in what it was they wanted. And without that, it's just up to us. We just have to kind of throw darts at the wall and see what sticks. So I didn't feel as though it really enhanced my ability to get work, but it certainly saved me gasoline, saved me petrol driving to auditions. And now today I've got a whole new sort of hill to climb with social media, because it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I was contacted by some people that we work with in Team Fortress 2 to get involved in the Comic Cons and the fan base, and making personal appearances and things like that, and signing autographs. I didn't even realize that Team Fortress 2 was still a going concern. I hadn't recorded anything for it for at least 5 or 10 years. And I thought, well, the game ran its course. It was great while it lasted. I worked for probably 10 or 12 years doing voices for it. But then I discovered what it had become. And I'm still pinching myself at what a vast reach this game has around the world now, and how many young fans are still really into it. That leaves me with but this is all the reason why I wasn't aware of it, was because it was on social media now, and I wasn't really on much on social media. I was on Facebook. That was about it. So, and maybe LinkedIn, but now with Instagram and X, formerly Twitter, learning how to stay connected with fans. It's just learning a whole new job, and it's fascinating, but it's also not that easy. And but I knew I had to do it when I was speaking to another interviewer one time not long ago, and the interviewer said, the rumor has been going around for some time now that Dennis Bateman is dead. And I said, well, that's exaggerated. Why is this? Why would this be the case? And they said, well, they don't see you on social media. So, and if you're not on social media, you must be dead. And so that was a real eye opener for me right there. That was the wake up call. So I'm doing my best with the social media now and trying to stay in touch with the fans, and I really appreciate all the followers that we get and that I get, and especially the interest in the search for Sandvich, which of course is a serio comedy at the very least, and we enjoy doing those a lot and enjoy the fan response.
Of course, we're going to be delving all sorts into more about Team Fortress 2, search for Sandvich, the getting on social media, stuff like that. We will be touching on all of that, of course, with many more questions very soon. I just want to pop one question before we delve into the TF2 stuff, and that is about, well, you've been in many projects. You've been in things like Northern Exposure, The Fugitive, Men of Honor, and of course those video games you mentioned as well from around the 90s era of gaming. So what other kind of particular roles on camera or over the airwaves or behind the microphone for these kind of games, what other sorts of roles have stood out to you?
Well, I was let's see. I'll just start with a couple of theater things that I enjoyed. I worked with the Alabama Shakespeare Festival for a couple of seasons early in my career, and that was great. That's when I worked with the Alaska Repertory Theater and toured the Southeast to all kinds of different venues down there. You'd be amazed how Shakespeareified the Southern United States is. And I think that has a lot to do with, the people that settled that area from Britain and back in the 1700s and 1800s. So I did quite a bit of Shakespeare there for a while. On stage, I've gotten to play Sir Arthur Conan Doyle in a movie about the fairies. What was it called? Cottingley Fairies, I think it was. A story about a couple of young girls who went into the woods with their father's camera and some paper doll cutouts, took pictures of these fairy cutouts frolicking through the underbrush, took pictures of them, bought them back, and they were developed, and they took the country by storm. Everybody believed now that there was photographic evidence that there are actually fairies in the bogs and fens of England. And Arthur Conan Doyle, what would we say, the highly intellectual creator of Sherlock Holmes, was convinced as well. And that's what the story was about, how Doyle actually supported these girls and tried to prove, with the help of the Royal Photographic Society, that those photographs were true. There's been a couple of movies made about it, and you'd enjoy that story if you looked into it. It may be second nature to all Brits. I don't know. So that was fun to play Arthur Conan Doyle, a Scotsman, and then I actually got to play President Harry Truman in a play about. Oh, it was kind of a fanciful story about two young people from the time of the Hiroshima bomb that meet up in the Bardo, I guess it's the Buddhist sort of limbo where souls go, and there were flashbacks to how the bomb was conceived of and utilized, and I played Harry Truman's part in that, opposite Albert Einstein. Then a couple of years later, I played Albert Einstein in another theater here, which was fascinating because I didn't know that much really about Einstein at the time. But he had a daughter that no one knew about until he died, and they found evidence of her and his effects. And a playwright decided to cook up a story about how the long lost daughter, who probably died in infancy, was grown up and comes back to confront him in Princeton, New Jersey, at the university when he was working there as a researcher in his 70s. So those are three characters that I really enjoyed. And film, I loved the opportunity to do a movie of the week about two gossip columnists, I shouldn't say that, advice columnists in the United States back in the mid-century, 20th century, named Ann Landers and Dear Abby. They were sisters, and yet they both had very popular columns in the nationwide newspapers. And at one point, one of them was interviewed by the journalist Edward R. Murrow, and I got to play Edward R. Murrow in that particular segment in that movie of the week. And I always think back that I don't know if you're familiar with Murrow. He was he spent quite a lot of time in England, I think, during World War II, reporting on the Blitz and things like that. But had a very distinctive voice, and always a cigarette in his hand, and always impeccably dressed with his suit on. And my agent told me that when I booked the role, because I was the only actor that actually showed up wearing a suit with a cigarette in my hand, which was stunning to me because I thought, how could you play Edward R. Murrow without that? So those are some favorite roles in terms of, let's see. Yeah, there was Men of Honor, as you know. That was a great opportunity to work on a set with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Robert De Niro. The second film I was actually involved with Robert De Niro. The first was in New York City many years earlier, film called, I believe, Falling in Love with Meryl Streep and De Niro. Whenever, I'll go back to my first days in New York City. I first arrived, and when you got into New York City, as a young actor with no contacts, really, the first thing you did was register yourself with various agencies around town that would cast extras. And so I got pretty busy doing extra work at the very beginning. And if you ever see the film of Annie with Albert Finney and Anne Reinking, and you see the sequence in Radio City Music Hall with the Rockettes, I'm right there watching. I'm trying to think of the director's name, the old fellow, John Huston. Believe it or not, John Huston directed Annie. The director of The African Queen directed this musical. It was quite interesting. But that was great. I got to have lunch with Jeffrey Holder and Anne Reinking and Albert Finney. Then I was in a film called Staying Alive, and every time I hear that song or I see this plethora of what would you call them? Rave dances, two people walking down the street, and the song begins and suddenly they're dancing. that song comes back all the time, and I always think of the day I spent in the rock club down in the Bowery called CBGB's, which at the time was, I think, the place where punk rock and Devo, that's where they began. I think probably Sid Vicious worked there too. So there's some of the favorite roles I can point to that I look back on with a lot of affection.
Let's get talking about, of course, Team Fortress 2. Let's rewind the clock all the way back to when you first auditioned for Team Fortress 2. Could you tell us more about that auditioning process?
Of course. At this point, we were already recording our auditions at home and mailing them off on MP3 files to our agent, who would then pass them along to the producer. And I got a lot of game copy in those days, and so I worked on various things for companies like Monolith, and Valve did quite a few things, and some other things I was involved with. I've done a voice on Dota, which comes back every year in the International Festival. But we sent those auditions in, and I believe that's how I was booked on The Spy. I remember very clearly that what we call the specs, or the specifications for the spy character, were some sort of generalized European accent is what we're looking for. He's an international spy, a la the 1960s, and we haven't decided what nationality he is, but you can play with that. So, I did a few different takes, and the spy might have ended up as an Englishman or an Irishman or a Scotsman or an Italian or a Frenchman or a Portuguese. And eventually, so I tried all those: Spanish, Italian, and the one they seemed to like was the sort of faux Frenchman, the pigeon Frenchman. So I went in to record that, the first recording session, and what a lot of folks may not know is that we did not work in a studio together ever. All of these characters in Team Fortress 2 and all the other games I ever did was me standing by my lonesome in a studio in front of a microphone, headphones on, producers on the other side of the glass, along with the technician, and I would have pages and pages of copy in front of me that would just be the lines, just the random lines that they were going to cut together as conversations later on in the game. And not just lines, but also many pages of really cord ripping death screams, blood curdling, war rattles, and all kinds of phrases like "fire in the hole." And they had to be high energy, loud, passionate. And so I got to the point not long after I started doing that sort of work, that I would walk in and say, "Look, if there's battles in this, we do those last," because I found that my voice would be pretty raw by the end of a session of that, and then they would hand me the dialogue, and I would sound like this. So I finally said, the words come first, and then all the shrieks. Okay. So that very day, I recorded some of those, and we got the tracks that they liked, 3 or 4, versions of every line. And kudos to the makers of this game, because they were able to take all those disparate lines and blend them together into just such seamless dialogue and animation that it's just, to me, it's still mind-boggling. The sidebar to this is that it's not just the spy that I do in Team Fortress 2. There's also the lovable pyromaniac. So they said, we've got another character here. We haven't really put him out to be auditioned yet, because although he has lines of dialogue, nobody can really understand what he says because he wears a gas mask. So would you like to try this? And I said, sure, absolutely, hand it over. So we tried various ways to muffle my voice or garble my voice, and I tried it with, things over my face and whatnot, and without. And finally, we said, we happened on a technique that sounded good enough to them, like I had a gas mask on, I guess, and they said, okay, you got it. So that's how easily good luck can happen to you, because from that point forward, every time there was a recording session, I got to go in and perform 2 characters, just like Gary Schwartz does in the game. And there over the year, well, I was just going to say that it was a great gig because the game caught on, as you know, it became a big blockbuster. And honestly, I have to say, I had never played the game until about 2 years ago or last year when we were in Boston. And our super fan by the name of Shork, a fellow from Copenhagen, who's a videographer, he came over and decided it would be fun to put us all on camera playing the game. And I said, well, I can't do that. I would look like a fool. I don't know how to play the game. They said, well, that's the whole point. The fans will love it. So we did that, and I think they did. So they enjoyed seeing us sort of bumble around trying not to get killed. Yeah. So, but then I got to do that gig for come in every year, once or twice, to do more dialogue. At one point, they were even going to make plushy dolls with like the talk, like what we used to call when we were kids, the chatty Cathy doll, where you'd pull the string on the back of her neck and she'd say, "I love you," or "Where's my baby?" and things like that. Dingoes took my baby. Uh, they but that I never saw those. I recorded that session, but I never saw those dolls.
Well, here's hoping, of course, here's hoping that will become a reality. We'll be chatting, of course, a bit more about Shork as well later in the interview here. Then again, it does get me kind of interested about those lines that you recorded for the Pyro especially, because a lot of fans over the years have kind of wondered, like, what exactly is Pyro saying? And everyone's like, put the theories out, they've like written transcripts saying, I think Pyro's saying this and these lines, etc. It's a bit like an ongoing mystery of that particular character.
Yes, I understand that even the gender or lack thereof of the character has become fodder. Yeah, and now whether or not, well, no, that's about the spy. There's an ongoing controversy about whether the spy is the scout's father or whether scout is the illegitimate son of the spy. But for the Pyro, yeah, the Pyro's really caught on. He has lots of fans, or they have lots of fans, and I just sort of stay out of that melee about what gender he is or what species he is. But he's a lot of fun to do.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll find out what those exact words were, or the script will be found. Who knows? Who knows?
Well, I only wish that I kept them. I only wish that I kept all those scripts, which I did not. At the time, I didn't know they'd ever be interesting again. Some of that copy I've been able to get from Valve Studios. They had some archival stuff. I actually contacted them not long ago saying, I don't even have any of the articulated dolls, the action figures. And most of the other team members have stayed, I guess, more in touch with them over the years, and they managed to get a rogues gallery of all these toys. When I contacted them, they said, no, that's all long gone. We used to have a whole room full of it, but it's gone now. Shork was kind enough to acquire a spy doll for me the last time I met up with him, and I really appreciate that. And I finally ordered a little, digitally printed version of the Pyro, and I've got that now. But all they were able to really provide me with was some posters, along with some of this archival dialogue. And Shork has just put together with one piece of that, which is a monologue that the spy does, which never got used as far as I know, to sort of to create a new origin story of the team on how they got together. And he's just published that, and I think it's titled something like "The Spy We Might Have Known" or "The Spy We Didn't Get." That's, I believe, was on YouTube recently.
That actually snowballs into my next question about are there any kind of like particular lines or particular moments that kind of stand out to you for the characters? Like, any kind of bits of dialogue you thought it was quite fun to record?
Oh yes, lots of it. I mean, all of it for the most part. Especially the spy is is the most wonderful insult comic I think I've ever seen since a man named Don Rickles used to do that here on the American telly. Yeah, he's just full of quips and sarcastic bon mots and jabs. And I think my favorite of all, though, has to be the video from Expiration Date, where Scout comes to uh, humble himself and beg the spy to teach him how to get a date. And poor Spy, his skills in wooing the ladies are lacking, and he really wants to get a date with Miss Polly, who is one of the I suppose the bookkeeper or something for the team. And so I'm sure you're familiar with it, where he walks into this room, and the spy grudgingly agrees to give him some lessons in wooing the ladies. And at one point, the scout, he says, "Well, show me how you're going to seduce me. Seduce me." And the scout says, "What do you mean seduce you? I'm not going to seduce you." And he says, "Seduce me." And so he walks off and comes back a few moments later with a hospital tray, it looks like, with a bucket of fried chicken and a 6-pack of beer. And he says, "Okay, here's the way I'd set up a date." And Spy looks at it and just knocks it all off the table and says, "I am not one of your fried chicken tramps. Seduce me." And that line just stuck with me. I thought, that's such a beautiful description of the kind of women that the scout would date. So when we were at the PAX East Comic Con, I guess about a year ago. Was that a year ago or the year before? Yeah, that was a year ago in Boston. Shork had flown all the way from Denmark to record this video that I mentioned, where we played the game, and we tapped him as the moderator, much as you're doing right now, and to ask questions of the cast in the question and answer panel. And he said, Shork said, "Well, I'd like for all of you to say what your favorite line is from the show, if you have one." And so there are a couple of people ahead of me, and they've said something, and when it came to me, I just thanked my lucky stars that I remembered this line, and I said, "I am not one of your fried chicken tramps. Seduce me." And it's almost indescribable. The crowd was instantly on their feet, just ringing the rafters. I mean, that line just triggered everybody, and they were all screaming and yelling and applauding. And Robin Atkin Downs, who sat next to me, who of course plays the medic so wonderfully, he once the applause died down, he said, "And I'm supposed to follow that?" I said, "I'm sure you can." So yeah, those are some. And other things like "Oh, here lies Spy. He ran real fast and died a virgin." I mean, that's classic. "I'll see you in hell, you handsome rogue. Go to hell and take your cheap suit with you." Spy, emerges as kind of the only guy in the whole group that has a couple of more than 2 brain cells to rub together. So he's kind of the ramrod of the group, and I love that. And maybe it's typecasting. I don't know, but that's what I love about the Spy. I only wish I was svelte enough now to look like him in a blue suit.
I'm gonna have to throw in one of my favourite lines now at this rate, with especially the insults against the heavy, and he's always like throwing fat jokes like, "Too bad this wasn't a painting contest, eh, fatty?"
Yes. I was very lucky because before I ever went to my first Comic-Con, I was contacted by a company called Streamily in LA about just providing autographed prints for fans. And that's when I had to learn what a live stream signing event was. And that was, kind of a high learning curve. But I managed to pull that off all right with the help of one of the people from Streamily. And I ended up signing nearly 3,000 autographed prints that year. It must have taken me a couple of months to get them all finished properly and mailed off. So that's where I realized what the scope of this game was. And that's when I had to find out, because these were all individualized prints, which people could say, "Would you please do a doodle of a goat, or put a beanie on the pyro, or would you please do a doodle of Archimedes?" But most of them wanted a favorite line. And I thought, good Lord, I don't remember many of those lines. It's been too long, and I don't play the game. I wouldn't let my children play the game. We didn't have the Xbox because I thought it would be too violent when they were little. And but I thought, oh gosh, I wonder if I can find some online. So I put TF2 Spy dialogue, and lo and behold, there it is, all of it. I don't know how how it got up there. But page after page after page of spy commands and spy lines and things like that, Pyro, everybody. And so that was a lifesaver. And I've made a good long list of my favorite lines now that I am able to access.
If there's one thing that Team Fortress 2 fans are, it's not only dedicated, it's also really resourceful, especially with archiving pretty much almost every aspect, every kind of line of dialogue from the game, everything like that. Team Fortress 2 fans will grab it, get it online, get it shared to everyone and say, look, this is the history, it's still going.
Oh yes, I'm really just absolutely amazed by the skill and the artistic talent and the creativity of the fans around the world, because I've seen so many of those takeoffs, those videos and just the art that people produce related to the game, and just really gratifying to know that there are that many people who think we've done something. And what amazed me the most, since all I did was just record basically unrelated lines in a studio for a few hours at a time, is that fans will come up to me and say, oh, to all of us, I'm so happy to meet you because you got me through some really tough point in my childhood, or I wouldn't have made it without Team Fortress 2. Or, you just meant everything to me. You were like the voice, the voice of my childhood entertainment. And it's a really emotional thing for a lot of these fans, which is just so gratifying. And I can't say I understand how exactly, but the fact is that's what they tell us, and I'm really glad that we were able to provide some real entertainment and in some cases solace for people who were going through hard times. It's just great. I mean, the cosplay, I'm sure you've seen videos of the cosplay that some of these people do. And I've even been given gifts at these meetings and greet ups where that have been made specifically for me. A lot of them, all of them, by hand or by a digital printing machine. So and I'm just stunned. I was like, my gosh, this is like a prop straight out of some Hollywood studio. And that's just great. I keep them all as treasured souvenirs. In some cases, I wear them.
So let's get talking, of course, about, you mentioned earlier about migrating alongside Twitter, or X as it's called for some reason these days. And there's a particular hashtag that cropped up, Save TF2. Now, when did you actually start hearing about that particular fan movement to kind of save this amazing game? And would you say this encouraged you to be perhaps even more active than ever with the passionate, dedicated community?
If I'm right about what you're talking about, it's that there was a lot of malicious activity happening with the game online, I think, for a while. And so, yes, I mean, it was certainly by this point, I was hoping that the game would live forever. And so I believe, we did, I think all of us did some posting of, encouraging the fans to contact Valve, and ask them to step in, because by this time I think Valve in some ways had moved on to other projects, and but my recollection is that there have been some fixes made. There's been some response to these fan appeals to make the game more secure, I guess. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Real familiar with the content of that hashtag, but I assume that's what you're talking about. That the TF2, there were some technical issues that were preventing fans from enjoying the game to the fullest, which I think have been dealt with. You may know more about that than I do.
You're definitely in the right ballpark, yes. It's definitely in the lines of like cheaters online ruining the game for people, and Valve not really updating the game so much and not keeping the
Right.
community, up to date and transparency. So very much kind of like a call for all fans to kind of like, make the voices heard and say, come on, let's turn this into something positive to let everyone, absolutely everyone involved in this game, developer, voice actor, etc., that we love everything about this, we don't want to let it die, and we want, we would love to see whatever we can to keep it going. And there are, there's still some kind of issues with the game. It's still like a few problems here and there, but it's definitely, I definitely think this hashtag and the involvement, especially of the voice acting crews, like like yourself, of course, has definitely kind of brought the community together. I think it's done a lot of good for the community.
Oh, well, that's great to hear. I didn't get any feedback like that, but I was hoping that it would, have some effect. So great. I'm it's not only just for us at the stage of our careers, and some of us, as you know, are this is going back almost 20 years now that we did this game, but just because it seems to be still a source of joy and kind of comfort for so many people around the world. So I think for that alone, it should be kept alive for sure.
Let's talk now, of course, about the search for Sandvich. Now, I gotta know, how did this epic ongoing saga come about? And how, what was it like getting together with the voice actors and getting all these episodes produced?
Well, that's an interesting. Thereby hangs a tale as well. I mean, the inception of this actually happened when I was away. I was traveling, and I forget exactly where. I think maybe I was taking a holiday in Greece at that point, when there was the PAX West Comic Con here in Seattle, and I was invited to attend that, but it was kind of the tail end of the bad pandemic period, and my wife was kind of against me going into a huge, convention center crowded with people before we took off for parts, for Europe. And so I was leaving that weekend, and I said, I'm too busy packing and getting ready. I'm just going to have to bail on this one. But I believe it was Robin Atkin Downs and Gary, and maybe I suppose John Lowry, the sniper. They must have come up with this idea of what can we do aside from all of the stuff that Valve is doing or not, whatever, to and what's pre-existing to get the interest, keep the interest going, not only in the game but in us as actors. And so as I understand it, they walked for the first Sandvich, they walked into a sandwich shop. Now, I guess the sandwich itself is a token in the game that gives power to the heavy, I suppose. You could probably set me straight on that, since I'm still not a player. So they walked into the sandwich shop, and they decided we're trying to find the sandwich. Let's just do a guerrilla video right here in the sandwich shop, involving the sandwich sellers and the customers and the sandwich case and everything, and we're searching for the sandwich. And so they did. John just turned on his iPhone and started rolling, and the guys improvised it. It was just seat of the pants filmmaking, and then John, I suppose, edited it all together with some music and sound effects, maybe, and the rest is history. The search for Sandwich was on, and now I guess we've done about a half a dozen of those, mainly around his architectural or historic landmarks around Seattle, but also in outlying areas here where there's interesting things to see and do, and in Boston when we were there, we there was a sandwich video that actually showcased the spy going through an existential crisis about his career choice over a glass of Courvoisier, I guess, in a bar. And so we filmed that one there after the PAX East Comic Con, and it's been an awful lot of fun. I can't say that I can grasp a really solid plot line to these things, but I don't think that's the point. I think the point is we exist in an alternate universe looking for a sandwich, and we're all just kind of a dirty dozen for the 21st century out there making trouble wherever we can find it. And now you might be aware that there's a contest underway for a new script, or for possibly various new scripts, for fans to take part in the search and actually affect the outcome of some of these videos. So we're having a lot of fun with that too. These videos seem longer than they are, because of the visuals and the editing and things like that, and the non-dialogue action parts. The dialogue parts shouldn't be more than about 2 pages long tops. and maybe three. And I think John John Lowry went online to sort of for with a reality check for these would-be screenwriters, saying we're getting the scripts that are way too long for us to film. Um, the last one we did was 16 lines long, and that's all. That's all it really takes. So the dialogue parts are short, much like a feature film. Most of it is action, and with some dialogue interspersed. So that's something to keep in mind. Makes it easier on you, the writer.
What? So about the search for Sandvich kind of saga ongoing, of course. So, are there any particular scenes or episodes or kind of lines of dialogue from it that kind of stuck out to you as your favorite or the funniest?
Well, of course, I think the one where I am going through my dark night of the soul in the bar in Boston, I would have to point to, because that was the meatiest, role I've had in any of these so far. And well, let's see if I can think back on. It's just sort of it's sort of amusing where Spy is sitting alone by himself, getting drunk, I guess, and looking back over his misspent youth and thinking, I never really wanted to be a spy. I always really wanted to be an airline pilot or something like it, or maybe a hedge fund manager or a ballet dancer, actually. But why? But never a spy. Why a spy? And he goes on like this for a while until I say, until the team suddenly appears and they interrupt my reverie in the most rude way possible. And I say, this is supposed to be my moment of existential angst and fin de siècle depression or something like that. And I can't even have a suicidal moment without you harassing me. That sort of thing. I mean, you could find it online. And so I'd say that was the most fun I've had on those so far. We do have a lot of fun throwing bread crusts at each other. And of course, I get plenty of snarky lines in all of the things that we do. And it's a fun way to keep in touch with the fans. So we're all on board for those. I, in fact, have never met believe it or not, I've never met the Scout. We would love to have Nathan Vetterline involved with it at some point, but he just opted not to do that. But certainly from the spy's perspective, he's a significant other character in that thing. And he does such a great job in the game.
From what I've heard, I heard Nathan Vetterlin took some time off for a while from, because he used to do a lot of streams, like voicing in character. I think he did taken a bit of a hiatus for now to kind of look after himself and stuff like that. But I certainly hope that as well. And Nathan, if you're listening as well, by all means, whenever you feel ready, there's always a spot for you as well. If you want to jump on the Cyberden and get chatting about Team Fortress 2 and all things acting and voice acting as well. I was also going to point out with the, of course, the search for Sandvich. I got to say, there's also two other scenes that kind of always make me giggle as well. I again, loved the monologue as the spy getting abruptly interrupted. That always made me laugh. But also, I loved the romance angle, of course, with the pyro and this
Of course.
mysterious stranger. Yes.
How could I forget that? How could I forget that one? Yes, that was wonderful. That the pyro actually has a love interest. That's great. Yeah. And we all love the mysterious woman. Yes, absolutely. She's a gem.
I also love the one of the episodes where there's attacks of the breadcrumbs and everyone's trying to fight back, and you get Gary Schwartz getting full all out as the demo man, etc. Then at the end you just very kind of calmly go, "Yeah, that was easy," and episode just abruptly ends right there.
I kind of like the way Spy and Pyro. Pyro is kind of along for the ride, and Spy is sort of like the everyman who gets to sit back and watch all this this buffoonery happening and comment on it. I love that part. Kudos to John Lowry. John has written most of the scripts, and he has filmed all of them so far, and so he's really been the driving force, I think, behind this. Without him, she's the sine qua non of the whole operation. He and Ellen. Yeah, I'm would like to find time to work on, maybe write a script where, since we're all great imitators and dialecticians, I think, in this game, that somehow the crust would find a way through the mind meld to switch our personalities so that all of us would be suddenly the other one. That the spy would become the heavy, and the heavy would become, the scout, and that sort of thing. So I'm kind of working on that angle right now. That takes some writing skill, and I'm not much of a writer, so more of a performer.
Let's get talking about now with your contributions and working with that YouTuber you mentioned earlier, Shork, and um, how would you describe kind of working with him on all sorts of projects like, those redubbing iconic Team Fortress 2 videos and kind of goofy fan videos, dubbing the comics, things like that?
Well, Shork is a force of nature. As young as he is, to be as creative and energetic as he is, and he's a great videographer. I was most impressed by the last thing he did about the spy's prehistory, and he narrated the whole thing. He's kind of the wingman. For all of us. He's the influencer that keeps the whole community, I think, communicating with one another, and especially in terms of the fundraising work that he does for that involves all of us to raise money to help gamers with handicaps or other issues, financial issues, and things like that. Any help that they may need. So that we actually have sort of a philanthropic arm of TF2, believe it or not, that we're there to support the fans in however they might need it. And that's all as a result of Shork and his work. And it's great fun to work with him as a director and a videographer. He's got a team that he brings with him, a sort of skeleton crew who are all just top notch. And so, yeah, we always love to see Shork. I'm glad that he's managed to make it over across the pond and play with us at times like this. And I think he'll be here at the end of the month for the Emerald City Comic Con. And I might also put in a plug for, of course, the Comic Con. Well, we will have a question and answer panel there. We won't be signing anything there, but when that happens, what we do now is just book a room of our own down the street, and we have just strictly a TF2 party. It's called Meet the Mercs, and that will be on March the 2nd, and the Comic Con will be on the 1st. And anyone who's available the evening of the 2nd, which I believe is a Saturday, we invite you to just come and mix it up with all of the mercenaries and your fellow fans. And it's the first one we had last year was a big hit and a lot of fun.
Now I've got a bit of a spicy question here for you because it's quite a prominent topic for, you could probably argue, affecting a lot of actors and voice actors like yourself and like me. We're being voice acting talent as well. Surely, of course, you must have heard about AI voices. And what have your thoughts on people using, your performance as the spy, especially, of course, for AI voices when compared to the more guerrilla kind of sentence mixing, editing styles, and or for example, impersonations, etc. When compared to all those, what are your thoughts on the use of AI?
I believe that's a lot of why the actor unions went on strike this last year, was to try to exercise some control over the larger industry, the actual film and TV industry in this regard. But what you're talking about, of course, is a realm that is rather hard to regulate. In fact, possibly impossible to regulate. So I'm not for it. I mean, I think this happened to Gary already, where some lines were of his were just basically stolen from one of his games and put into some other production. And that's something that, from the Actors Union standpoint, that we should be compensated for and agreed to. But it's just kind of the Wild West, and I think it's a big threat to not just the talent that created these roles and these iconic voices and characters, but to the quality of the content that's out there. So I think that they're just AI, as the internet at large is a double-edged sword. There's reasons to think that it's going to be a boon to mankind, and other ways that it can be just a very destructive thing. So I think we're at the point now, as we are every few years with technology, where we have to stop and look at it and say, how are we going to control this? Because it does need to be controlled. It can be a great force for good or a great force for evil. And we want to try to keep it, on the out of the dark side and with the Jedi. So keep the force going with it and not the dark side. That's my opinion. That said, I'm again a digital immigrant, so I have only the most rudimentary knowledge of what we're talking about with AI. I'm sure there are lots of different versions and iterations of it that I'm not even aware of, and that probably no one is yet. But it's something to be amazed at and also a little bit wary of, or a lot wary of. And I'm hearing that from the people who invented it.
Let's take things in more of a positive direction now, of course, AI being, as I say, a spicy topic. So let's talk about then what kind of projects, any other projects out there that you would love to work on? Any franchises, any movies, games, any sorts of projects you would love to get involved in personally?
Most of us just really want to keep working on the best things we can grab, the best things that we can be a part of. You want to be a member of the club, whatever club that is, and you want it to be a high class club, and so I see things every day that I think I would have been great in, that I wish that I had an angle in, and they're really just given where we live, at least on camera, there's a limited amount of stuff available. I did spend about 5 months in Los Angeles few years back to try to sort of get a foothold down there, but and that was right before the pandemic, and I just thought, it's a point in my career when that would be like starting over again. When you go to a city like that, like New York, where I went in 1980 and started a career there, it's a lot of work and takes a lot of effort. There's a lot of people there who are after the same amount of work. And I found that in Los Angeles, there are various levels of the industry where there are the people who work on the good work, the people who work on the second string work, and then there are the sort of people who feed off of all those people trying to get ahead. And so, in terms of projects I'd like to do, I just like to have a chance at more of them. you know, I think now that the pandemic is passing, that we now have a sound studio in Seattle where and our state has finally appropriated $20 million to woo production into the state. Up until that point, we had like $3.5 million compared to someplace like the state of Georgia that gives $80 million. The state of Oregon was giving 15 or $20 million, and now we're finally getting up into that area where we can begin to attract, the legitimate work into the Seattle area. So I can't say that there's anything in particular. I would like to actually, unless it would be a film version of TF2. I mean, I'm finding that now is the Renaissance period where games and even toys like Barbie are getting their tier jump up into feature filmdom. And I would love to see TF2 have a feature film made of it, and I would hope that I could be a part of it. So if there are fans who think like I do, let's put our collective muscle on the internet and try to kind of sway the powers that be to do that.
Now, before we round off this interview, I always like to ask this key question, and that is, when you're not acting, voice acting, searching for the sandwich, how do you personally like to relax?
I'm an avid reader of history. The older I get, the more I understand how important history is, especially at this particular political moment in our country. I rely on historians more than journalists to give me perspective. So I like to read about history. My wife and I begun to travel a bit more now that the virus is somewhat under control. So we've been to Greece and Portugal, and just came back from Tucson, Arizona for a couple of weeks. So we're traveling a bit. Actually, I'm a fancier of what's called New Yorker style gag cartoons, and I do a bit of that. I also, in terms of activities, I play tennis and now pickleball. I don't know if pickleball has crossed the pond yet, but it's it's a fun game and easy for older people to play because the court is smaller and the ball doesn't bounce as fast. So, but it does tend to cause issues with people who see their tennis courts being taken over by pickleballers over here. So, but that's something that I think might catch on in England if you have people that like racket sports. I have actually hired. I've enlisted my millennial son to also kind of be my social media manager. So I like working with him to make sure that we can keep my presence up there with all the rest of the what we call the mercs to keep the game on everybody's plate.
Father and son production going on there. Lovely stuff indeed.
Yes, I don't hear about it unless I get an audition call, and I'm still hoping that I'm going to reach the age where I will outlive all of my competition and I'll get all the calls for people for men in my age range. That's a pipe dream. But yeah, there seems to be some forward movement in that regard. Yes, that's good. That's good news because there used to when I first moved to Seattle, there was a lot of film and TV production here, and I think that the willingness of community in Seattle just wasn't there to have film trucks and wardrobe trucks and craft services and things sort of blocking off the roads in their neighborhoods. But then Oregon really jumped on that bandwagon and they've really run with it. Most of the film work I've done here and TV was done south of us down in Oregon, the state of Oregon, where both of my sons live now. So, we have strong connections down there.
Dennis, let me just say, it's been an absolute blast getting you on board once again, so thank you so much for coming to this interview.
And Jake, I can't tell you how much fun it's been to hear your voice again, your pear-shaped tones, and let's not let it be 9 years again. It's fun talking to you.
Is there anything that you'd personally like to say to the many, many fans of Team Fortress 2 out there?
Yes, you handsome rogues, don't you ever die. Keep on playing. We love all of the connection that we have with the fans. When I get a chance to meet the fans in person, it's just one of the great joys of my life. They're just all wonderful people, which surprised me because this is such a gory game. When I first met them, I thought didn't know who I'd be meeting, but the Team Fortress fans are the most supportive and compassionate and fun-loving, just great people that I think I've ever met as a group. Yes, thank you for playing. We'll all be having. There will be after the Comic-Con in beginning in March, throughout the month of March. All of us will be having more live stream signing events. So just keep in touch on Instagram and Twitter and or X, and we'll give you the heads up on all of that. Au revoir, ma petite chou-fleur. Until we meet again.
I personally like to thank, of course, all of my wonderful listeners out there for tuning into another great interview right here on the Cyber Den. So, Dennis, thanks for coming on board, and watch out for those other enemy mercenaries out there.
We will. Thank you for the advice. It's good advice. Be well.
Gentlemen, this is a spy from Team Fortress 2 speaking. Keep listening to Mr. Jake, the voice, on the Cyber Den. Fail to do so, and I might just pop in unannounced when you least suspect.